The wedding invitation never came. I checked my mailbox daily for weeks, fingers trembling slightly each time I opened it, hope fading a little more with every empty pull. I scoured my email spam folder obsessively. I even casually texted my brother James asking about the wedding details without admitting I hadn't been invited, only to receive a vague, "It's all handled" in response. The painful truth settled in my stomach like a stone. My only brother was getting married, and I wasn't welcome. I still remember the day we built sandcastles on Nantucket Beach, James teaching me how to create perfect moats that wouldn't collapse when the tide came in. "See, Admiral Hayes," he'd say with that crooked smile, saluting me with sandy fingers. "Your fortress is impenetrable. It was our thing. I was Admiral Hayes, commander of imaginary naval fleets, and he was my loyal first mate." Now, 15 years later, I couldn't help but wonder when that bond had disintegrated so completely. The divorce was the beginning of the end. I was 12, James 16, when our parents sat us down in the living room, their voices unnaturally calm, as they explained they were taking some time apart. Dad moved out that weekend. Mom started drinking more, and James became a ghost in our house, staying out late, speaking in monosyllables when he was home. I was too young, too scared, too self-absorbed in my own grief to recognize that my brother was drowning too. By the time he enlisted in the Navy at 18, we were practically strangers, sharing DNA and childhood memories that felt increasingly like they belonged to different people. I attended his graduation, watched him in his crisp white uniform, so much like our father it made my chest ache. We hugged awkwardly afterward, and I thought maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. But distance and time only widened the gulf. Occasional phone calls dwindled to holiday texts. When I graduated college, he sent a generic "congrats" message 3 days late. When our father remarried, James flew in for the ceremony and left immediately after, barely acknowledging me beyond a stiff hug. When our mother was hospitalized after her accident, I was the one who sat by her bed for 2 weeks while James called once, citing deployment restrictions. So maybe I shouldn't have been surprised about the wedding snub. Maybe it was the logical conclusion to years of mutual neglect. But logic doesn't soothe the heart, and mine was breaking all over again. I found out the wedding details anyway through our cousin Emma, who mentioned it casually during a call, assuming I was attending. "Boston in June! So much better than a winter wedding, right?" She'd chirped, and I'd agreed numbly, frantically scribbling down the date and venue while fighting back tears. For weeks, I debated with myself. The rational part of me said to respect his wishes, to accept that whatever relationship we once had was gone. The wounded part wanted to confront him, to demand explanations. But there was a third voice, quieter but persistent, that whispered, "Go anyway. He's still your brother. This might be your last chance." The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. I stood in my apartment, staring at the simple navy blue dress I'd laid out the night before. It wasn't fancy enough for a wedding, but it was the best I had. My hands shook as I applied mascara, as I twisted my hair into a presentable bun, as I slipped on the pearl earrings that had belonged to our grandmother. "You're being pathetic," I told my reflection. "He doesn't want you there." But I went anyway. The church was beautiful soaring ceilings and stained glass windows that cast kaleidoscope patterns across the polished wooden pews. I slipped in minutes before the ceremony began, taking a seat in the very back row, half hidden behind a pillar. My heart hammered so loudly, I was certain everyone could hear it. And then James appeared at the altar, resplendent in his dress whites, medals gleaming on his chest. He looked so much like the brother I remembered, and yet so different older, of course. but also more confident, more settled in his skin. The man standing there was a stranger to me, and the realization brought fresh tears to my eyes. I watched as his bride glided down the aisle, radiant in white lace. I watched as they exchanged vows, his voice steady and sure, in a way I'd never heard before. I watched as they kissed, as the congregation erupted in applause. And through it all, I felt like a ghost present but unseen, witnessing a life I was no longer part of. The reception was held in the garden of a historic hotel nearby. I debated not going. I'd seen the ceremony. Wasn't that enough self-torture for one day? But that persistent voice urged me forward. Just a little longer. Just see it through. I hovered at the edges of the celebration, nursing a glass of champagne I'd snagged from a passing waiter. No one questioned my presence. In a gathering of 100 or so people, I was just another face, another well-wisher. I watched James and his new wife, Melissa. I'd learned from the program dance, their first dance. I watched him laugh with friends I didn't recognize. I watched and felt myself becoming smaller, more insubstantial with each passing minute. I should leave, I whispered to myself, setting down my empty glass. This had been a mistake. What had I hoped to accomplish? Some dramatic reconciliation scene like in the movies? Real life didn't work that way. Real life was messy and disappointing and full of broken relationships that stayed broken. I was halfway to the exit when the microphone squealed with feedback, and James's voice filled the garden. "I want to thank everyone for coming today," he was saying, his arm around Melissa's waist. "Family means everything to us, and having you all here." He faltered suddenly, his gaze sweeping across the crowd before landing, impossibly, on me. Our eyes locked across the sea of faces. I saw shock register in his expression. Then, something else I couldn't identify. My body tensed, preparing for humiliation. He was going to call me out, ask who invited me, make a scene. Instead, his face transformed with a smile I hadn't seen in 15 years, that crooked, boyish grin from our beach days. "Actually," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I just spotted someone very special. Someone I didn't think would be here." He raised his glass, eyes still fixed on mine. "Ladies and gentlemen, please make way for Admiral Hayes." The reception fell silent, 100 pairs of eyes searching the crowd in confusion. Who was Admiral Hayes? What naval officer had just arrived? I stood frozen, my cheeks burning with a flush that spread down my neck, as James stepped away from his bride and began walking directly toward me. Each step he took felt like an eternity. My mind raced through escape scenarios. I could slip out the side door, disappear into the Boston evening, pretend this humiliating moment never happened. But my feet remained rooted to the spot, trapped between fear and a desperate, childish hope that had survived years of disappointment. "Sarah," he said when he reached me, his voice so soft only I could hear it. Not Admiral Hayes anymore, just Sarah. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhaustion or emotion, or both etched in the fine lines that hadn't been there when we were children building sandcastles. "You came." "I wasn't invited," I blurted out, immediately regretting the accusation. "This wasn't the place." "I mean congratulations. Melissa is beautiful." "I didn't think you'd want to come," he replied, running a hand through his military short hair, a nervous gesture I recognized from our father. "After everything." The vagueness of everything hung between us, years of silence and missed opportunities compressed into a single word. Before I could respond, Melissa appeared at his side, radiant in her wedding gown, curiosity bright in her eyes. "You must be Sarah," she said, taking my hands in hers with genuine warmth. "James has told me so much about you." I couldn't hide my surprise. "He has?" James looked away, embarrassed. "Of course I have. You're my sister." Sister. Such a simple word. Yet it felt foreign after so long living as strangers. I wanted to ask what exactly he'd told her. The good memories or the bad? The years of childhood closeness or the decade of estrangement? But this wasn't the time for such questions, not with the entire wedding reception watching our reunion unfold. "Come," Melissa said, still holding my hand. "You should be sitting with family, not hiding back here." She led me through the crowd to the head table, where an empty chair mysteriously appeared between James's best man and what I assumed was Melissa's sister. The seating arrangement had clearly not included me originally. Whispers followed us, the wedding guests undoubtedly wondering about this last-minute addition, this Admiral Hayes who had caused such a stir. I sat awkwardly, a gatecrasher suddenly elevated to honored guest. The dinner service, began salmon or beef tenderloin, neither of which I could taste through the knot in my throat. James kept glancing at me from across the table, our eyes meeting briefly before one of us would look away. It was excruciating, this pantomime of family connection, both of us too cowardly to bridge the gap with words. The reception proceeded through its traditional paces. Speeches were given by the best man, by Melissa's father, by James himself, who thanked everyone for coming, but made no further mention of his surprise sister. Cake was cut, bouquets were tossed, and through it all, I felt like an imposter, a character inserted into someone else's story without proper introduction or explanation. During a lull in the festivities, as the band took a break and guests mingled by the bar, I escaped to a quiet corner of the garden. The June evening was perfect warm without being humid, the air scented with roses and lilacs from the hotel's meticulously maintained flower beds. I leaned against a stone balustrade, letting the cool stone ground me as I tried to process the surreal turn my day had taken. Admiral Hayes, requesting permission to approach. I turned to find James standing a few feet away, 2 glasses of whiskey in his hands. He offered one to me with that same hesitant smile. I took it, our fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. "Permission granted," I replied, the childhood response coming automatically despite the years. He came to stand beside me, both of us looking out at the garden rather than at each other. The fairy lights strung through the trees cast gentle shadows across the lawn, creating an ethereal atmosphere that felt removed from reality, a fitting backdrop for this impossible conversation. "Why did you come?" he asked finally, breaking the silence. "After not hearing from me?" I took a sip of whiskey, welcoming the burn. "I needed to see for myself, I guess, that you were happy, that you were okay. And you seem both happy and okay." He nodded, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I am. Mostly." A pause. "It would have been more okay if you'd been properly invited." Why wasn't I? The question that had haunted me for weeks finally escaped. What did I do, James? When did we become this? He didn't answer immediately, taking his time with a long swallow of whiskey. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "It wasn't you. It was never you, Sarah. After Mom and Dad split, I just couldn't. I couldn't deal with any of it. Being at home felt like drowning. Every day. And you were there, always wanting to talk about feelings, always wanting to fix things, and I just couldn't." "So you left," I said quietly. "I left," he agreed. "The Navy gave me structure, purpose, a way to be someone other than the kid from the broken home." He glanced at me. "And then it just got easier to stay away, you know? To be that other person all the time. To pretend I didn't have this whole other life, this whole other family situation that was complicated and painful." I understood that impulse All too well the desire to reinvent yourself, to shed the skin of family trauma, like a snake shedding its old, restrictive layer. Hadn't I done something similar by staying in Boston after college? By limiting my visits home to holiday obligations? As for the wedding, he continued, I convinced myself you wouldn't want to come, that it would be awkward for both of us, that you'd probably say no anyway. He gave a self-deprecating laugh. I told myself I was sparing you the obligation, but the truth is, I was scared. Scared? Of what? Of this, he gestured between us. Of having to face how badly I've failed as a brother. Of having to admit that I've missed you every single day, even when I was too stubborn to reach out. My vision blurred with tears. I've missed you too, you idiot. He chuckled, a wet sound that suggested he was fighting his own tears. Well, that makes us both idiots then. We stood in silence for a moment, the admission hovering between us like a fragile bubble, beautiful and precarious. In the distance, the band started up again, a slow, romantic ballad floating through the garden. How did you know it was me? I asked. In the crowd. You looked right at me. James turned to face me fully, his expression softening. I've always been able to spot you in a crowd, Sarah, even when we were kids. Mom used to call it my sister radar. And besides, he added with a hint of the old mischievous smile, who else would show up uninvited to my wedding wearing Dad's favorite color and Mom's pearl earrings? I laughed through my tears, touching the pearls at my ears self-consciously. I didn't even realize I was doing that. Some things are in our DNA, I guess, James replied, his smile fading into something more serious. Listen, Sarah, about what happened back there, when I called you Admiral Hayes in front of everyone. It's okay, I interrupted, suddenly embarrassed by the childhood nickname. They probably all think you were saluting some actual military official. No, that's not. He shook his head, frustrated with himself. I want to explain why I did that. The music from the reception drifted toward us, a reminder that we were stealing moments from his wedding day. Shouldn't you get back? Melissa will be wondering where you disappeared to. Melissa knows exactly where I am, he said with certainty. She's the one who told me to come find you. Actually, he looked down at his whiskey glass, turning it slowly in his hands. She's been telling me for months that I needed to invite you. This revelation stunned me. She wanted me here, but she doesn't even know me. She knows you're important to me, James said simply. She knows how much I've regretted letting things fall apart between us. She's been listening to me talk about my Admiral Hayes for 3 years now. 3 years? I echoed, disbelieving. James nodded, then reached into his dress uniform pocket and pulled out a worn, creased photograph. He handed it to me carefully, as if passing over something infinitely precious. In the fading light, I stared down at a sun-bleached image of 2 children on a beach, James, gangly and tan at 15, and me, all knobby knees and wild hair at 11, both of us grinning widely as we stood beside an elaborate sandcastle. I remembered that day clearly now. Dad had taken the picture just weeks before he moved out. I've carried this with me through 3 deployments, James said quietly. It's been to the Persian Gulf, the South China Sea, and on countless training exercises. It's my good luck charm. My throat constricted. Why this picture? Because it reminds me of who we were before everything fell apart. Who we could be again, maybe. His voice grew hoarse. That day on the beach was the last time I remember feeling like we were a real family. After that, well, you know what happened. I did know. The arguments that started as whispers behind closed doors and escalated to full-blown shouting matches. Mom crying in the bathroom with the shower running to mask the sound. Dad sleeping on the couch, then not coming home at all. The slow, inexorable collapse of everything we'd known. When I spotted you in the crowd today, James continued, it felt like I don't know, like a sign or something, that maybe it wasn't too late to fix things between us. So you called me Admiral Hayes, I said softly, understanding dawning. It was the only thing I could think of that would let you know, he struggled for words, that would tell you I remembered, that those memories still matter to me. The significance of the gesture hit me full force. In that moment, with hundreds of people watching, James hadn't just acknowledged my presence, he'd reached back through time to reconnect with the bond we'd shared before life tore us apart. He'd offered a bridge across the chasm of estrangement, using the language of our shared childhood. Nobody else knew what it meant, I realized aloud. Nobody needed to, he replied. It wasn't for them, it was for us. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, both lost in memories. The photograph lay between us on the stone balustrade, a tangible reminder of what had been lost and what might still be recovered. Do you remember what we used to say? James asked suddenly. When we finished building our fortresses? A smile tugged at my lips. Admiral Hayes, protector of the realm, defender of the shoreline, guardian of the sacred sands, keeper of the eternal tides, he finished with me, our voices synchronizing perfectly, despite the years apart. We both laughed, the ritual words unlocking something that had been sealed away for too long. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for a decade. I can't believe you remember all that, I said, wiping away a fresh tear. Are you kidding? We said it every single time. Mom used to roll her eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck that way. The mention of our mothers sobered us both. How is she? James asked hesitantly. Really? Not the sanitized version you've been giving me in holiday cards. I considered sugarcoating it, protecting him from the reality of our mother's slow decline into bitterness and isolation. But we'd had enough walls between us. She's struggling, I admitted. The accident last year took more out of her than she lets on. She won't admit it, but I think she's lonely. She asks about you, you know, even when she's pretending not to care. James winced. I should have been there more. For both of you. We all could have tried harder, I acknowledged. It wasn't just on you. From the reception, I could hear the distinctive opening notes of the electric slide, followed by cheers as guests flooded the dance floor. James smiled ruefully. Melissa insisted on including it. Said no proper American wedding was complete without at least one cheesy line dance. I like her, I said honestly. She'll be glad to hear that. She was worried you'd hate her on principle. Why would I hate her? James looked uncomfortable. Because she has me, and you don't. Anymore. The raw honesty of his statement caught me off guard. It was true part of my pain, had been the sense that I'd lost my brother to a life that didn't include me, that he'd found new connections to replace the ones we'd shared. But seeing him now, witnessing his genuine remorse and his desire to rebuild what we'd lost, I realized that perspective had been too simplistic. I could never hate someone who makes you happy, I told him. And I haven't lost you. Not completely. Not if we're standing here having this conversation. James's expression softened with relief. No, not completely. He straightened suddenly, military bearing reasserting itself as he made a decision. Come on, Admiral Hayes. Your presence is requested back at the festivities. Are you sure? I hesitated. This is your and Melissa's day. I don't want to intrude any more than I already have. You're not intruding. Your family. He offered his arm formally, eyes twinkling with the old mischief I remembered. Besides, I believe I owe my sister a dance. We rejoined the reception as the electric slide was ending, guests laughing and slightly breathless from the exertion. Melissa spotted us immediately, her face lighting up as she wove through the crowd to meet us. Everything okay? She asked James, her eyes flicking between us with gentle concern. getting there," he replied, squeezing my hand. "Melissa, I'd like to formally introduce you to my sister, Sarah. Sarah, this is my wife, Melissa." "It's so wonderful to finally meet you," Melissa said, embracing me warmly. "James talks about you all the time. I was heartbroken when he couldn't work up the courage to send your invitation." I raised an eyebrow at my brother. "Couldn't work up the courage, huh?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I told you I was an idiot." "The biggest," Melissa agreed cheerfully. "But he's my idiot now, so I have to defend him a little. He spent weeks drafting a letter to send with your invitation, but he could never get the words right. Then the wedding planning got crazy, and suddenly it was too late, and he convinced himself it was better this way." "A letter?" I asked, curious despite myself. James shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted to explain everything, to apologize properly. But how do you fit 10 years of regret into a letter?" "You don't," I said softly. "You just start with hello and see where it goes from there." The band switched to a slow song, and couples began pairing off on the dance floor. James looked at Melissa, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded encouragingly. "Sarah," he said formally, extending his hand, "would you do me the honor of this dance? It's been too long since Admiral Hayes inspected the fleet." I laughed through fresh tears, taking his offered hand. "Permission to come aboard, sailor." As James led me onto the dance floor, I caught glimpses of curious faces watching Ush's Navy friends, Melissa's family, distant relatives who probably didn't even know James had a sister. But their curiosity didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the tentative reconnection happening between us, the fragile bridge being built word by word, step by step. "I can't promise I'll get everything right from now on," James said as we swayed to the music. "I'm still figuring out how to be a husband, let alone a brother." "I'm not asking for perfection," I assured him. "Just presence. Just knowing that Admiral Hayes still has a place in your world." "Always has," he said with conviction. "Always will." As we danced, I thought about the journey that had brought me here from the pain of exclusion to the unexpected joy of recognition. I'd come to this wedding uninvited, carrying years of hurt and disappointment, expecting nothing but confirmation that the divide between us was permanent. Instead, I'd found my brother reaching across the gulf, offering the possibility of reconciliation through a childhood nickname that no one else understood. "Make way for Admiral Hayes" wasn't just a puzzling announcement to the wedding guests, it was James's way of saying he remembered who we had been to each other and who we might become again. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were years of silence to overcome, habits of distance to unlearn. But as we moved across the dance floor, finding our rhythm together just as we once had building sandcastles on the beach, I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of rebuilding what had been broken. Sometimes the most important invitations aren't printed on fancy cardstock or delivered with ribbon and wax seals. Sometimes they come in the form of 4 simple words, spoken from the heart. "Make way for Admiral Hayes."